Part of that is just, a little bit of doubt, a little bit of imposter syndrome. Like, am I really good enough to do this by myself? Or, perhaps at different points in time through your career, you probably doubted yourself and maybe thought that the reason I'm here is because I'm surrounded by all these other great people. And that's healthy. That's a healthy skepticism to have of yourself. It keeps you accountable, keeps you honest.
Yeah.
But also, like, if you've done your time, 15 years in the industry, chances are you've built if you've done a good job, built a pretty good network, pretty good reputation for helping people and doing the right thing by people. But also you've acquired a lot of really important skills and processes and procedures that are going to help you run your own business. And so, to the point about, not being reckless, I absolutely agree. I had an opportunity to start my own business when I was 21 or 22, and 22, and I didn't, and I ended up joining another business as a minority shareholder, and later down the track, because that kind of didn't work out and I'm sort of getting screwed there, I said, I should have just started my own business back then. But if I'm honest with myself, I don't think I was ready. I don't think I needed to acquire more skills. Hey, it's Julian from LoanOptions.ai, and today I'm here with a very, very special guest.
Hi, I'm Dexter Cousins, Managing Director and founder of Tier 1 People, Australia's #1 executive search firm for fintech.
So Dexter, usually it's roles reversed, and you're the one doing the interviewing, and I want to start off by saying that you've got by far my favorite fintech or any real sort of Aussie podcast. I think like the value that you bring to the industry and the ecosystem is second to none. The events like the one you did last year, the live podcast at the Credit to Watch HQ, second to none. Anyone I speak to, you're so well admired, and you do all of this stuff, and it takes a long time for you to set this sort of gear up when you're doing the podcast for people, with people. And so firstly, on behalf of the entire industry, the entire ecosystem, I want to say thank you. And, I certainly get a lot of inspiration from yourself, and a lot of other people do too. But it's not just your skills, your knowledge, the way that you talk. It's also the way that you give without any sort of desire to receive back. It's truly, truly admirable, and your values as a person are just absolutely amazing, and you should be very proud of everything that you've achieved. And Tier 1 People is obviously your sort of your core business, and I'd love to probably start off from the very beginning about how you've ended up getting here, because there's a lot of great things that you do, a lot of your engagements with really quite big businesses, and also scale ups and startups and the whole breadth. But let's start off from the beginning.
I kind of go back to, my very first kind of experience with technology. Christmas Day, I got a ZX81. It had 1K memory, and I got a 16K RAM pack. Now, imagine what you can do with 1K, right? It's the least amount of memory possible in a computer. And I spent all day typing in code literally till my fingers bled, and watched this ball bounce up and down the screen over about 3 seconds. And that was it. And I decided at that point I never ever wanted to be a coder, developer, or any of those things. But kind of fast forward, and what I did want to become was a graphic designer. Went to uni, dropped out, kind of bummed around a bit. Grew up in a place called Newcastle, which is the north of England. had really high unemployment, like 30% unemployment. And it was kind of, very much focused on coal mining, shipbuilding, all of these dying industries. And look, I was just a bit of a dreamer as a kid, right? Kind of always would watch Miami Vice on TV and think, one day I'm gonna be in this, all these grey, kind of bleak, rundown, kind of industrial environments. I'm gonna be in this sleek sunshine beach, kind of. But that seemed like a million miles away when I was a kid, and I ended up working on building sites and doing all these kind of retail jobs and stuff like that. And then my parents split when I was about 7. He had a publishing business in London. This was around about the mid to late 90s. And he said, "Oh, look, you've done design. Why don't you come down and work with us, and you can do design with the magazine?" So I was like, "All right, cool." But unbeknown, at the time, the business was really struggling. However, what an experience! So what the magazine did was followed karting, go-karts. But it followed specifically what had been done previously was kind of old men hobbyist karters. And what we focused on were the European Championships, where you had guys like Lewis Hamilton, Rosberg, like basically all of the guys who, were racing Hamilton's era. And it was kind of like the halcyon days looking back of, like Alonso, like all these guys were like racing, right? And so interviewing them, we're doing race reports. We kind of did this whole thing around branding where all the drivers had our logo on their helmets. And it was just amazing, right? We got to interview Michael Schumacher. We won the FIA Media Award for the year. But look, it was hard to make a publishing business work, and you're chasing debtors for advertising. And these guys are running like karting teams, and they're all it's
Interesting people.
yeah, right. So it's kind of to try and get money from them is fairly difficult. And unfortunately, the magazine went under. That was kind of like the late 90s, early 2000s. And I was bumming around and, walked into a recruitment agency one day and they said, "Hey, there's a day's work here." I wasn't going to do it. But I decided, what the hell, you may as well. What else have you got to do? And that was kind of one of those moments in life where I look back and I wouldn't be sitting here now with you had I have not taken that one day's work, because it then led to a couple of weeks. I then was offered a permanent job by that business, and 5 years later I moved out to Australia with that company and helped set up a business in Melbourne. That was tough, as you can imagine, coming to a new country. This is 2004, so 20 years ago this year. But look, you learn a lot about yourself. I rocked up with a suitcase and a laptop. And that was it. That's all I had to my name. I didn't have any family here. Just a little bit of money in my back pocket, but it was literally just starting my life from fresh. And did that for 12 months. Then decided I wanted to be in Sydney. Moved up to Sydney, and then spent probably the next 8 years or so working with boutique financial services executive search headhunters. So some of the best in the business, really well renowned. Learned a lot from those people. Worked with brilliant people as well. And it was actually 8 years ago, decided to go out on my own. Reason being, I was working with a small business and I could see there was going to be a massive opportunity in fintech. And I had a whole business plan kind of ready to go. And the MD of the company that I worked for said, "Hey, look, there's no money in startups. So, you got to, if you want to do this, you're going to have to, do what you're already doing. And then, you can do this on the side." And I figured, what's the point in me going through all this pain to give half of it to somebody else?
Yeah.
Go and do it myself. So I had about 3 months savings, quit my job. My wife was like, "You best make this work." And look,
all the best businesses started like that.
Yeah.
I'm a firm believer in, not having a plan B. Because the thing is, if you have the plan B, if you have the contingency, you're only ever going to commit to the extent, commit to the plan A to the extent that you have the fallback. And, the burn all the boats. You've heard that expression.
I think it's hard to do that though, right? When you've not got like a fallback option.
Yeah.
So both my wife and I are English, so we don't have any family out here. So I had to make it work, but I couldn't be reckless just to I've got a young family and, obligations. So it wasn't reckless. It was more that, hey, I backed myself to do this. It's like, and I remember every year, because I've got it.
You'd also done your time too, right?
Like, yeah. I mean, I was 15 years into the industry by this point, right? So it was, I'd built a network, but it was still a bit of the unknown, particularly the fintech part, right?
Part of that is just, a little bit of doubt, a little bit of imposter syndrome. Like, am I really good enough to do this by myself? Or, perhaps at different points in time through your career, you probably doubted yourself and maybe thought that the reason I'm here is because I'm surrounded by all these other great people. And that's healthy. That's a healthy skepticism to have of yourself. It keeps you accountable, keeps you honest.
Yeah.
But also, like, if you've done your time, 15 years in the industry, chances are you've built if you've done a good job, built a pretty good network, pretty good reputation for helping people and doing the right thing by people. But also you've acquired a lot of really important skills and processes and procedures that are going to help you run your own business. And so, to the point about, not being reckless, I absolutely agree. I had an opportunity to start my own business when I was 21 or 22, 22, and I didn't, and I ended up joining another business as a minority shareholder, and later down the track, because that kind of didn't work out, and I'm sort of getting screwed there. I said, I should have just started my own business back then, but if I'm honest with myself, I don't think I was ready. I don't think I needed to acquire more skills, more expertise.
Right. And I look at my journey, and whilst it's been kind of permeated by entrepreneurship and side hustles and stuff, so when I was in recruitment, I had a side hustle with a mate where we were promoting nightclubs like Ministry of Sound and Cream and all these guys, and it was amazing. It was again something that I kind of took the experience and put it into this business, where we were basically promoting DJs and DJ nights, and it was again just the kind of marketing around that and creating this kind of community, right? Like, and this kind of sense of being. But I think the thing that I've got a black book that I started writing in when I first started the business, and every year on the anniversary of when I quit my job and started day one, I get that black book out and I read it. And I just read it the other day because it was actually March the 1st when it was, the anniversary. And there were 3 things that I wrote there. And the one about your imposter syndrome was, millions of idiots have done this before and been successful. And it was kind of, and it was psych yourself up, not down.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think that was the kind of the things that I got. And I looked through it and I kind of had my action plan. And honestly, I look at the network that I've built since starting the business, and a lot of the people that originally kind of were clients, no longer are. And I've built this whole other network, which happened just, I think one was incrementally, but 2 is, as soon as I kind of latched onto and went all in on fintech, it then really helped formulate what the mission of the business was. I don't know about you, right, but I've been at Tony Robbins events and read all the books and done loads of stuff around self-help, ever since I was in my early 20s. And kind of one of the things that regularly comes up is, you kind of, what's your mission, right? And I could never get anything down where I felt like that was congruent. It was like I really felt it. So it was this stuff that sounded good, but it's like, am I saying that to somebody else? And what really kind of, where I really found with tier 1 people, the thing that kind of, there were a few catalysts, but I think one was just getting the mission, and it was a one that was really genuine, where it was just, I want to put us, be part of putting Australia on the map as a place for fintech innovation. I want us to be one of the best, and I'm absolutely certain that the way that I do that is by finding the best people,
Yeah.
and helping create what is a environment that's, people want to aspire to, they want to be part of it, right? They're excited by it. And of course, the kind of experience that I had in karting and, I mean, Formula One, you couldn't think of a more aspirational like event, right? Like it's like, and sport, right? Like it's kind of the elite of the elite, right? Where it's like
The margin for error is so
Yeah.
small, and the risks are so high, and there's no glory, for the people who
Yeah.
also ran.
Yeah.
If you're in the top 10, you get some points, but
It's like a founder, right? It's like 90% of these businesses are going to fail.
yeah,
And it's like, it's kind of like
crazy.
the stakes are as high as, Formula One, right? It's like,
yeah. Well,
and it is unfortunately, right? For some people, it is life or death, right? It's like,
It
it has
is,
some
yeah.
serious impacts on their family, their mental health, their physical health. And I think it's, so I've seen that the parallels kind of between what I'd been doing within motorsport and publishing, what I'd been doing within, it wasn't just nightclubs. I mean, it was like, this was the rise of the superstar DJ where, all of a sudden it became this multi-billion-dollar industry overnight, and it was just, everybody wanted to, be the DJ, and that was kind of like now the modern day, at the time was like, the rock star. And I've just found that taking the approaches that we'd used there and then applying them to founders, which was, look, this business isn't about me. This is about you. It's about my clients. And it's about creating a platform where people get to see what you're doing, right? The sacrifices that you've made and the journey that you've made, where you get to share, your story, your journey. And hopefully what that does is it helps your business because people get inspired by it and they reach out and they either want to work for you or be a partner or, kind of, collaborate with you or whatever it might be. And I think one of the kind of things that I never intended with the podcast, Julian, was how you opened the show, right? I never thought it would. I thought it would lead to business, but I never thought it would lead to friendships. I never thought it would lead to inspiring other people to start their business. I never thought it would become an archive for if you're a fintech founder in Australia, like go and listen to this because this is going to give you warts and all about what you're getting into.
I mean, the stories that you hear on your podcast of like, because too often, and I feel like podcasts are the right format for the warts and all. I think it's the only format for the warts and all.
Yeah.
You can't paint, like, as much as, I'm making a conscious effort to post more about the lows as well as the highs, on LinkedIn and stuff, and talk about the hard work rather than talk about the outcomes.
Yeah.
Because the thing is, like, to get good outcomes, like recently I counted it was something like 50 different events that I'd traveled for 8 weeks and spent this much time away from the family. Because, like, what ends up happening is when people see you successful or getting some success, right?
I was thinking about this on the drive down, right? I thought this is something that we should talk about.
And there's Alex Hormozy talks about, his story, and I'm going to use this story because I saw it in a clip and I just thought that summarizes it perfectly. When he first started his own business, he started a gym, like personal training, and he was sleeping in the gym. He had, like, when his clients would come in, he'd have his pillow and blanket in the corner of the garage or wherever, a little small spot he had. And they're like, man, good on you. Like, congratulations for hustling. And, you keep this up, you're going to be very successful.
Yeah.
Then, sort of a little bit down the line, he had this big gym space, staff working for him, all this kind of stuff. And now they started to give him the, Mr. Hollywood. Sort of. And he's like, at the end of the day, people want to see you do well, but they don't want to see you do better than them.
Yeah.
And there's a problem with that, especially in Australia, less so in the US. But, even the other day at the Formula One, Max Verstappen gets ruled out of the race. I was actually surprised and disgusted by how many people were cheering at that.
Yeah.
In my view, Carlos Sainz was the best all weekend. I'd messaged the team and said, Carlos Sainz for a podium. So it's a sure thing. He was so consistent. Every lap was better than the previous one in practice and in qualifying. He actually passed Verstappen before Verstappen had the issue. But the thing is, Verstappen is such a good race car driver, and I know he's been so dominant. That's why they were cheering it. He didn't get hurt, thankfully. But it's strange to see that sort of behavior from people. It's like they want to see the downfall, or they're sick of seeing people win. They want to see someone else win. It's just strange. I mean, Formula One is such a high achiever. Like, we're talking about, and I'm running a newsletter at the moment about the science of Formula One, and the G-force that their bodies are subject to.
Insane,
the
right?
physics, we're talking about engineers that are sort of, rocket scientists, effectively. They understand, sort of aerodynamics to a degree that, you can't even comprehend the sort of millimeters that they're, less paint to make the car lighter, and, people making jokes because he had his appendix out. Carlos Sainz had an operation, the week before, 2 weeks before, and they're saying that's why he won, because he's, weight reducted his organs, But it's like, Alex Hormozzi said they want to see you do well, but they don't want to see you do better than them, because it almost is like they resent themselves for not fulfilling their potential.
It's that rocking chair test thing, right?
Yes.
Going back to that, and I think you're absolutely spot on what you've said. I've
seen us about the rocking chair thing, because when you told me about it, I was like, actually, that's just
so. One of the things that you were talking about, motivations to start a business, and you'd mentioned, it was with life events, and for me, it wasn't. It was more the point that I think I just got fed up with myself.
Yep.
Because I really wanted to do this. It was a dream that I had of having my own business. And I kept delaying it, and I had good reasons too, family and kids on the way and stuff like that. But I kind of just reached the point where I just couldn't tolerate myself anymore. And I kind of when I speak to a candidate and they're considering an opportunity, if they're uncertain, what I'll suggest to them is, hey, I'm not going to try and sell you this, but do a pros and cons, and then take the rocking chair test. And that is, kind of project that at the end of your days, you've had a really, good innings, and you're sitting on the porch in a rocking chair, contemplating life, and you're at the end of your days. Is this going to be an opportunity that you wish you'd have taken, or not, right? Do you think you'd be pretty happy if it passed you by? And look, for me, taking that rocking chair test was like, I'd never, ever, ever be able to sit in that rocking chair happy if I don't do this. So as I mentioned, I'd like 3 months to make it work. You make it work. But I think that whole thing around, and we're seeing this a lot actually now, and I think it's kind of one of the hangovers of COVID, is, we've got all of this, people become addicted to bad news and kind of chaos. And I think one of the reasons why is that it was a real leveler, right? None of us could get ahead because we were all stuck in our homes, and certain people got comfortable. And I think now that that's gone, it's kind of like the reasons or the excuses that people want to give themselves for not doing stuff. Classic ones are ones we do ourselves, right? We know we got to go to the gym. Can't be bothered. Oh, I haven't got time, right? And I think of the amount of people that said time was the issue, and then we went into lockdown, and all they had was time, and they piled on about 10 kilos, baked bread all day, and binge watched Netflix. Some people, worked out and went, hey, I'm gonna, kind of figure out a way to use this time effectively. And I think, look, that's just human nature, right? There's a small population of us which, is really where I think my business and tier one people, we're fintech, we're executive search. But if there's something that I would say We do differently to everybody else. So we're specifically looking for a type of person, type of leader who's going to flourish in an environment like Loan Options, right? Business where you walk in day one and you're writing your own job description. If the printer's broken, whatever, you're fixing it, right? Yeah, you can strategize as much as you want, but you got to execute on it.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Like, most people don't have, one, the experience, but two, the mindset to actually be able to do that in a high pressure environment. So going back to your Formula One drivers, yes, it takes a lot of money to be a Formula One driver, and it really helps. It's not just about talent, but let's not pretend that just because your dad's rich, you can be a Formula One driver.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Right? Like,
Yeah.
this is, you're kind of up against, you have to have something special about you, regardless of where the money's coming from. And I think this is, it's very similar, I think, to working in an environment like Loan Options or a startup or a scale-up business. So it's a unique type of person. And so when we talk about talent shortages, it's just something that we're always going to have to deal with, because we're always going to have this small like pool of the population who are cut out to do it.
It's so true. There's only a very, like, out of a sort of, the wider population, there is a small group of people who are born leaders. And then there's this even smaller group of people who can not only lead effectively, but can actually also execute.
Yeah.
And then, you deal, by the time you get to a tier one person, it's a subset of a subset of a subset of a subset. And the fact that you're out there actually doing that process and filtering, and actually have the network that knows, this is a tier one person.
Yeah, and it's
I
tough,
love the
right?
name, by the way. It's
Yeah,
perfect.
look, it's kind of, I was actually, the story behind that. So I had the name about 4 years, and a week before I was about to not launch, but kind of was quitting my job, so I had a week left in my notice period, and I was already registered. The domain name was Tier One Talent, and I'd had that for 4 years, 5 years, something like that. And I just was like, it's not right. Yeah, it's not right. Like, I don't know why, but it just didn't. And I was like, what's this business about? There's two bits of advice that I've been given that, like, you always go back to, and that is, was to always follow the best people, the top people, and then, to always go where the money is, right? You do those two things in recruitment, you got a business, right?
Yep.
If you don't, you're going to struggle. And so I was like, well, what's my business about, right? So it's about people.
Yeah.
So I call it Tier One People, and then, it's great. The acronym's top. You kind of great. Yeah.
I didn't
even think of that, right? Until, somebody pointed out like 2 years later, right? Or like, why don't you kind of call it top? And I was like, then I say, kind of building a brand, right? Like, people know you for, and I just get Tier One now, right? So
Tier One.
People say Tier One. But what's, I think, really kind of difficult about particularly kind of managing the network is when you're at the very top of the game, right? And you're getting rejected. It's for like the smallest things, right? And it's really hard to explain to people. People want feedback. Mate, you've done nothing wrong, right? Like, this person just had this slight edge over you, right? Like, they've had this one experience, right? Which was just more relevant to what you've done, right? And I think, unfortunately, there's these kind of memes that go around that you hire on potential, and, you do with a graduate, but not when you hire on leaders,
not an
right?
Executive. And there's a point that I want to raise. I always say to people, you spoke about how you follow the money, and obviously those things. When people ask me for career advice, they might come to me and say, I had a bit of a crossroads or whatever. I always sort of try and use an NRL analogy. I'm like, those great players that are great when, remember when Melbourne Storm was dominant, or
Yeah.
even now Penrith Panthers are just dominant teams. They're tier one teams,
Yeah.
right? Some of their players take the money, because as an athlete, and it's a bit different to a career, but your career has a lifespan too, right?
Yeah.
And and the reason for that is someone who's maybe 55 or 60 years old is probably not necessarily going to be the one you look for if you're a new AI startup.
Yeah.
And there's many examples of where I'm wrong about that, and I'm not talking about the exceptions. I'm talking about the rules specifically,
Yeah.
right? Someone who's probably been around long enough that understands the latest technology and probably grew up working on the latest technology, but also and has enough experience that they're not a junior, but also not so old that they're out of touch with what the future is going
Yeah.
to look like. But the analogy about the NRL players is sometimes they take just the money, and your point about following two things is very, very important, because if you just follow the money, like some of these NRL players have done in the past and other athletes have done in the past, it actually shortens your career and leads to less value in the long run. So I typically say you want to be on the winning teams where possible. And there's a number of reasons for that, which I will unpack, and I will get to it. But if you can get paid well and get treated well, and I'm not maybe not the top offer, but it's very close to it. You do absolutely do have to value yourself. But the alternative is, like, I'm going to use an example. Let's say someone like Josh Adokar, one of the best wingers in the game, playing representative football in basically every level when he was at the Melbourne Storm, and then he goes to the Bulldogs, and I'm confident that because they're in a rebuilding phase, I'm confident at some point he'll be able to regain that form and that sort of, like, at one point he was just untouchable, and you just like, this guy, you want him in your team. But what happens is when you're on a losing team, or if you're selling a losing product, right, and your business is not that well positioned in the market, it's either on the way down or it's flatlining, or there's an emerging player that's taking a lot of the market share away. What you're doing to your career is you're actually attaching yourself to the downfall, or the downward spiral of a business or an industry or whatever it might be. So I always say, try and be on the winning team. Try and pick a place where you're going to be valued, because sometimes there's really good teams that have really good products, but they treat their people very poorly.
Well, to use your sport analogy, look, I think unfortunately, most people, when it comes to their career, they ain't even playing sport. They're lying on the couch for 3 years, 4 years, 5 years, eating chips, drinking beers, right? And they then get a tap on the shoulder to say, sorry, you were making cutbacks. We're downsizing. We're using AI. We've improved processes you're no longer required. And they look in the mirror and they're like, geez, I'm like 15 kilos overweight, right? I've spent the last 3 years, right? Now they've got to try and get match fit. And, it's taken them 12 months and they're still 5 kilos heavier than they were, when they kind of, went before they lay on the couch. And I think, unfortunately, this is what a lot of people are doing with their careers. And what I'm saying, Julian, is, the reality is that careers have changed drastically over the last 15 years. If I look at the data, so, this is tracking data back from 2008 here in Australia. When you look at the kind of tenure of an exec in Australia, back in 2008, it was 5 years. By 2017, it had reduced to just under 3. And now, and particularly with respect to the kinds of businesses that I deal with, like, average tenure of an executive is about 12 to 18 months.
Wow.
So if you think, right, like, those jobs, they don't come by very often. So it might take you 3 to 6 months to find a role. And every 18 months you've got to do that. You're talking about 30% third hit to your annual income, right? If you kind of calculate that over 10 years.
Wow.
And people are kind of asleep at the wheel at this, and it's not until they get out in the market, and everybody's, the amount of people that I get, hey, I'm on the market, and it's like, yeah, who cares? Right? Yeah. It's like, just because now you're looking doesn't mean that all these opportunities will open up. And one of the reasons why I think follow the top people is so important now is that, the reality is your next gig ain't coming from me, isn't coming from an ad. It's coming from somebody who you work with, who's, on the winning team.
That's right.
The winning coach, who's like, they get pulled into these things, right? They win the thing, and that's like, right, I need to get my A team around me.
The value that the teams like Melbourne Storm have, right? Like in terms of what they've done to players that in any other environment.
Well, look at State of Origin, right? Like, people are like, oh, Billy Slater. I was like, they're gonna smash New South Wales. You know why? Because Billy Slater is a born winner. Like that guy, just like, I've never seen a player like him. I've never seen an athlete like him, and I've just never seen like that Melbourne Storm team and the Queensland team of like the 2000s, mid 2000s onwards. I've just never seen a team with that will to win ever. And probably Manchester United in the 90s, 2000s under Ferguson were probably the only other team that I've seen that has that absolute like mindset where everybody is in unison, values, goal, expectations of each other,
standards are really high.
Will, like, fight, like all of the things that you need. I mean, to get that in a group of people is something really special, and that's why you only see like few coaches can actually do it.
And the other reason is when the business that you join is growing and has great products that have product market fit and all those things, the money does come. The opportunities will come. The career growth will come. So if you're taking a short-term hit, but you're part of a winning team, the tide rises all boats, and you'll have opportunities that you're maybe not going to get. That's a company who's paying a bit more, and you're getting the short-term gratification of that additional income, but it's maybe a bit more stagnant, and maybe they're going to have to make some layoffs because their growth isn't sort of.
I've got a good analogy, right? Let's say you decide that you want to go and climb Everest, right? Who are you going to pick as your guide? Both these people have been to the summit, right? One took a helicopter there, and the other one climbed up. Who are you going to take as the guide?
I'm taking the guy who walked up backwards.
Right. And this is when it comes to hiring, right? This is when decisions are made. Don't tell me the outcome. To your point earlier, outcomes. Look, the reality is we like to think that it's down to us, but there's so much external stuff, right? And so. And what we do as a society is we look at somebody who's got a great outcome and then go, they must have the secret. Why is there billions of dollars spent every year on secret? Whether it's a course or it's a book or it's an event. None of the secrets. They're not secrets. They're in every single book I've ever read on self-development. And they are simple, right? Like they are simple principles. The challenge is executing them and being disciplined to stick with them, right? And the ego gets in the way. And I remember
everyone wants the silver bullet. Everyone wants the magic pill. Everyone wants that.
Or the worst thing, and it's something that I did, early in the business, was I went and I got advice, and there was 2 bits of advice that's kind of rang true from everybody who'd been successful. First one is start, just take baby steps, and then the second one was focus, like be in a niche, like focus in an area. And that's where I kind of wasn't. I was trying to do all these different things. I was thinking gig economy and fintech and AI and it was like crypto, and it was which like, and I was trying to be everything to everybody. And it was really starting to have an impact about 12 to 18 months into the business. You know, and I had a really great start and then kind of fell off a cliff. I remember meeting a business coach and we were talking, you know, he was asking about my business and he was asking all these questions. I was like, oh, you don't understand my industry. Yeah, you don't understand, right? And he's every time he was challenging me and questioning, you just don't get it. You know, you don't get it. And, yeah, I was like really kind of pushing back on everything this person asked. And at the end of the conversation, he said, hey, it's been really nice to meet you. I've just got one last question. Do you want to be right or do you want to be successful? And I was like, you cheat.
Love that.
Fuck. I was like boiling inside, right? I thought, who are you, to talk to me like that, right? And I kind of went away, thought about it over the weekend. I was just like, oh, you idiot. Like, you idiot,
Yeah,
right?
it's good that you recognize that for what it is.
And it was kind of literally that weekend I went, right, that's it. I'm going all in on fintech. And I kind of, all of the advice that I'd been given and the people that I'd spoken to that I just didn't listen to, because I was kind of like everybody, when you have a bit of success, you kind of get high on your own supply, right? And you think you've God's gift. And yeah, that was a really kind of humbling experience, and a one where, yeah, you're kind of really glad that you learned the lesson, but you're also glad that, hey, actually, like, it's possible to turn things around, but it starts with you, right? It starts with you accepting, right? And kind of cutting all the bullshit away and just, like, being open, and like listening. And I think one of the challenges that you have as a business owner, or just generally in life, is you get so much noise coming at you. You get so much kind of advice thrown at you, and people give out advice away for free all the time. And the reason why is because it's mainly worthless. And I think, that people mean well, but everybody's got an opinion on something they've never done before. You've only got to go on social media, right? Like, see, business goes down or startup goes down. You got all these people who've never run a business before saying, "Oh, I knew this would happen." "Oh, look at them, what idiots they've thought." Or, and you're like, "Okay, yeah, but you've worked at like American Express your whole career. What would you know about running a business? Like, what would you know about what it takes to be an entrepreneur?" And I think that, unfortunately, the challenge for people is, how do you be open-minded yet cut out all of that noise and focus on the stuff that's a signal? And I think that again goes back to what we talked about just before, right? When you follow the top people, right, they've done this stuff before, right? Go and get their advice, but don't take their word for it. Go and triangulate with another person and another person. Go, okay, right, that's 3 people, who've all done this before, and kind of what, they've done different things, but in here is kind of like, that's the thing that I need to focus on.
And the same thing goes for criticism. They say don't take criticism off anyone you wouldn't take advice from. And I love that, because it's like sometimes people let for every 10 good compliments they get, they'll get one bad one, but they'll fixate on the bad one, the bad comment. And you shouldn't do that either, because
unless you're a customer and you're paying to criticize me, I don't care, right?
Exactly.
You can say what you want, but I'm not listening to it. Whereas if it's a customer, I'm like, oh,
of course, take the feedback on board.
Tell me more, tell me more, tell me more.
Of course. And they usually aren't paying customers that are the ones, saying the bad stuff, or having sort of personal attacks, really.
Yeah.
But, like before you spoke about, how people are sort of getting attracted to the shiny objects, and you were targeting all these other industries. I learned the same lessons. I sort of very early on, I wanted to build one business, and then we started to have some success, and then I thought, well, I can easily replicate the success across many others. And what the best advice I can give to, and I'm not talking about age here, I'm just saying youth, relatively new entrepreneurs. I'm going to say young entrepreneurs, because I don't mean age. I just mean sort of people that are just maybe had some success in the early. The allure or the attraction of trying to take over the world and have 10 different businesses and 10 different verticals, or not even in different verticals in the same vertical, but having different branches or different spin-offs.
You know, it's something that I kind of learned through that, but I've been watching some of Alex Hormozi's stuff as well, right? And it's kind of been quite, I don't know if reassuring, right? Because I don't know the guy. He's obviously been successful, but you know, my view is, unless I know somebody personally, I'm kind of not going to hold them on a pedestal as they kind of, you know, they're the oracle or the guru. But I think a lot of what he said, you know, I've experienced myself as well, which, you know, you got these buffoons who are like, you know, omni-channel.
I've got 10 businesses and blah, blah.
It's like, you know, just focus on the one thing. Particularly if you're like a small business or a, you know, solopreneur, or, you know, you got to just focus on the one thing. And, you know, I think that's what I got to was, look, right, focus on this one space and dominate it.
Yeah.
Right? Like, just dominate it. How do you dominate it? Right? You just do stuff, be useful, be helpful, right? Elevate others, right? And you'll go with it.
Yeah.
Give to people, right? Don't do it as some kind of, you know, like pro rata, you know, you've been on my podcast now, you got to give me a job. Just seek out people that you really believe in, share the same values, that you're really interested in their product, you want to see them succeed, you want to try and be helpful and useful. And when the time's right, it's a natural, you know, kind of process for you to work together, right?
Yeah.
And I think, unfortunately, I see in sales, you know, and I'm sure you get bombarded with all the emails as well, right? Like, you know, they try all these Jedi mind trick stuff that was from like the 80s, right? Like, I'm available at 2 p.m. for an online meeting. Like, who gives a shit? I don't know who you are. You just like kind of interrupted me through my day. And you just say, what are people like thinking? Like, how does this actually work? And, you know, the reality is that you sell to people by being helpful, by being useful, right? Like, and not being a dick.
Yeah.
You know, instead, we're kind of, you know, we think that, you know, there's this other part of, you know, 90% of the world thinks that you sell by hassling and annoying the crap out of people, right? You know, but if you kind of just happen to, you know, annoy 99.9% of your potential customer base to get a sale, that's not really a sustainable business, right?
No, that's right. There's so many examples of that. There's, you know, you can learn good skills and you can hone your sales ability, but ultimately people want to deal, especially in a service business, you know, it's different if you're like, I always talk about the difference between selling a product and selling a service.
Yeah.
And the analogy I always seem to come back to, because I can't think of a better way to describe this. If you're buying a Toyota from a new Toyota dealership, does it really matter if Johnny Smith or, you know, Angela Smith sells you the car? Not really. I mean, ideally, they're good to deal with and they're honest.
I think the interesting thing with that, right, when you shake hands, the deal is done. Yeah. In my business, when I shake hands, the deal's just started. Yeah, that's a good point. And ultimately, whether the client deals with a good salesman or a bad salesman, the product is inevitably, if you're talking about Toyota, the product is good. Yeah.
You know, and it's probably going to be a good chance. You know, not to single out Toyota, there's many other great manufacturers these days, but, you know, Toyota's known for its reliability. Yeah. It's probably not the most flash car in the world or whatever, but...
I don't know about you, right, but a mate of mine, he got a new car and he said, oh yeah, I did 6 months research, you know, and what did you end up getting? He said, the same as the old one, but in black. And I was laughing, right? I was killing myself laughing at him, right? 6 months later, I got a new car. You went, what did you get? I said, you're not going to believe this, same as the old one, but in black. So I don't even know what these salesmen do, right? Because everybody goes, I like that car. I'm just going to get a new version of it, right?
Yeah. Well, I mean, you're seeing like a totally different sort of shift and dynamic in the automotive industry. Like you got like the movers and shakers like Tesla, where you just like go online and order it and there's no negotiation, it's fixed price. So, you know, the product is good, but you imagine people have a bad experience with a Tesla salesman, for example. Like they're way less likely to want to buy that car. So they can actually be a prohibitor to the product. And if, you know, you've got two equivalent products and let's say they're comparing a Hyundai i30 and a Toyota Corolla, the salesperson can make a difference. Yeah. Because if they hate the Toyota salesperson...
You know, we wouldn't buy a Toyota, and the reason being... that when this was about 10 years back when we bought a car, my wife went to test drive it, and I basically, where's your husband? She's like, he's at work. Oh, he needs to be at the test drive. She was like, you what? And it was like,
that's just
right, yeah, okay, that's kind of brand damage for life, right?
Yeah. And so there is that risk. I think ultimately, if the person's already decided that they want to buy the Toyota Corolla, then the salesman probably doesn't matter. But in the
my wife loves
process,
to get in free mats and throw in some mats.
and in a service business, you don't really have anything that you're selling per se. Like the money that people can get from my business and any of the banks that we have access to is no different. Let's use the same thing. Let's say they're using loan options to fund this Toyota Corolla that they're buying from the Toyota dealership. If they use my money or Toyota Finance's money, they're still getting the car.
Yeah.
The end result is the exact same. Where there'll be devil in the detail is like, does our product offer no early termination fees? Does our product offer XYZ compared to the other one, right? Does it offer an online portal they can log into and make payments, blah, blah, blah. So there are some differences, but as far as the customer is concerned, this one costs this much and my repayment's this much. This one costs this much and my repayment's that much. And they both give me the same thing. Well, I'll just go with whatever's cheaper.
Yeah.
But if the service and the value add that you're going to look, I'm going to be a dedicated relationship manager. So even in the future, if you want to buy a different brand car, I'm still going to be able to help you. I'm going to make sure that you have somebody to contact 7 days a week. It's not going to be like the dealership where once they've sold you the car, they're not going to pick up your phone calls anymore. So, but they have to love you. They have to, if you're a service business, you have to understand that your customers must love you. It is so important that your customers love you. It's what makes them stick and come back.
I think that's one of the great things with a podcast is, one of the challenges that I've always had in recruitment is, my client's only going to be hiring once a year, right? They're probably going to look for a job. The average tenure of anybody that I put into a role is more than 2 years, right? Which for startups and scale-ups is like 10 years in a corporate, right?
Yeah.
So, if somebody's coming to me and I've got building that relationship with them, I'm not going to go poaching them. Hey, you're coming up to 2 years now. I'll, take you out to this place, right? It's like, that's not how it works, but you got to keep a relationship with people, right? That you've either put into a role or clients that you're working with, right? And the reality is that, if I help you find, chief product officer, I'm not expecting any other business, right? Because what I'm expecting is we're going to find you absolutely somebody shit hot. And the rest of the people in his network are going to want to follow him. So you don't need to pay any recruiter fees to hire the team, right? And he's going to be here with you 3 years, 4 years, 5 years, right? So when's the next opportunity for us to work together? Well, I don't know when that's going to be, but if I keep ringing you every month going, hey, Julian, you got any jobs? Hey, Julian, you got any jobs? You're going to be thinking, like, what is it with this guy? He's like, and I've had another 20 recruiters ringing me, and I put up an ad on Seek, and now I've got all these guys. Yeah. So for me, it's about how do you, in those moments in between, provide things of value, things that are useful, things that actually help them, right? Not help you, but help them. And I think that's where content, podcasts, sharing insights, doing events, all of that stuff is like, that's the kind of sales collateral of the 21st century, right? And unfortunately, I don't think, even when I see it done, it's done with such a kind of intent around, we just want to sell you stuff. We just want to tell you about how great we are, right? Nobody's interested. I think this is what I kind of stumbled on with, the karting magazine and working with the nightclubs was, we weren't telling anybody about how great we were. We were just giving people a platform and elevating them, right? Yeah. And they thought we were great. When we said, hey, do you want a sticker to put on your helmet? They were like, yeah. And then they'd see, Lewis Hamilton with a sticker on his helmet go, can I have one? Can I have one? Can I have one? Before you know it, we've got them all over. Everybody's got them over their carts. They've got them on their helmets. Wow. right? And because people want to be part of that community, right? And when you see people being elevated and it's positive, success breeds success, right? Failure fucking loves company,
Yeah, yeah.
right? To what you were saying before. And unfortunately, you know, it's not people being nasty. They don't want to feel alone. And I think that's kind of one of the big challenges that you have, right? Is just how do you surround yourself with those people? And it's what, you know, what I've really done with the platform and the intent of it is, look, you know, there's plenty of places that are going to knock you down. We're not it, right? We're not it. You know, we're not looking for a story. We're not looking for you to say something, you know, that you're going to later regret. This is about making you look like a rock star to other people.
It's a great scrapbook because I think if you go back to, let's say you're a founder and you did your podcast, and you know that was a snapshot in time, right?
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
what was.
It's like my black book, right? I look at it and
Yeah.
I'm embarrassed. Right? How did you get here? Right? How did you get here from there? Right?
I'll tell you a story. We recently launched in New Zealand, and we've been shuffling. Like we started in a tiny little office, and the team's growing, so we've had to move. You know, we're in a co-working space, but we've had to move within that co-working space into bigger and bigger office. And the other day they sent me a photo, and I was like, I've seen this photo before. Like it's uncanny. I've seen this photo before. So I went through my camera roll, and I'm going to show you when we've done this because it's actually a little bit spooky. And when we first started Loan Options in Australia, there is a photo that is like, I can't tell you unless I show you. It is almost identical. The layout of the desks, the person sitting in the corner, the size of the office. And it's just like, I look at it and I get deja vu. And
Wow.
it's just like, this wasn't planned. This was just someone who from the New Zealand team taking a photo. And I took the one in Australia in when we obviously launched in Aussie a few years ago. And these photos side by side are like, it's just like when I show you, you're gonna freak out. But it's like it's a scrapbook. The photos you take, everything you do as a founder, all the memories you create as many of them as you can along the journey. Because like when it is all said and done, and you know maybe it's a successful outcome, and you know you exit the business and you set your family up for life, but maybe it's not. Maybe you have to start again. Maybe you make some mistakes, you get involved with the wrong people, whatever, and you have to start again at some point. Maybe the business fails. But you'll either be blessed with the triumph or you'll be blessed with the lessons that allow you to go on and triumph. And
there's a saying, I think it was Winston Churchill, which is failures never fatal, success is never final.
yes. Yeah, it's beautiful.
And I think
lots of good quotes from
I think you're spot on what you say, right? And you I think what's really helpful about having notebooks, kind of keeping a record of what you've done, a diary, is that you go back, and I don't know about you, right? But like I kind of, if I've got a challenge, I kind of analyze stuff a lot, and it gets built bigger in my head. I get quite anxious about it, and I get scared, and say, oh shit, and I always kind of think, what's the worst that can happen? I'm not the person who thinks at the Hollywood end, and I'm more of a kind of shit, like if these are the things that could go wrong, I've got to be mindful of that, but I know what the outcome is that I want. And kind of knowing that, and the nature of the business, right? It's like everything's on success, just doing deals, right? So you kind of know that, there's lots of things that can happen, even when you do everything right. There's lots of things that can stop it from happening. And so, being overly optimistic, I don't think is actually a very good kind of quality to have in my line of work. You've got to be thinking, hey, look, because I'm not dealing with a product, I'm dealing with a person who's got their own emotions. And so what it does is it forces me to be very thorough, to not leave any stone unturned, to not make assumptions, and to challenge people and say, hey, look, I see somebody do this, what it usually means is, they're having second thoughts. Now let's talk about it, right? Something on your mind, here's your opportunity, right? And most people go, yeah, there is something I'm not quite comfortable about. So that kind of, yeah, not pessimism, but always just like, look, it's not.
I think it's just being pragmatic.
Yeah.
I think you got optimists, and then you got pessimists. You got the realists in the middle, and if you're able to be just realistic, like, okay, yeah, it's good to explore. Here's what success looks like, but also here's what failure could look like, or here are the things that are probably the telltale signs that it's not going that well.
There's a kind of danger with it, right? That then you start to talk because it's what you're focused on.
Yeah.
Right. You become what you focus on.
Yes.
And so there's a kind of fine line between kind of managing the kind of downside risks and being thorough and pragmatic and all those things, but then getting psyched out.
Yeah.
Like, can I actually do this? Can I make this happen?
And
that's where I find the books are really helpful, right? Because you go back and go, how were you feeling at that time?
Yeah, it's one of my biggest regrets.
Right? Like, you weren't sleeping much, but looking where you are now, you didn't have to worry about losing sleep, right? Like, you figured a way out. And I think what I've found is it's just, and I actually do this now where if I'm taking on a big challenge, I'll do like a meditation, and then I'll kind of project myself 10 years from now. 10 years from now, me coming back to who I am now, going, hey, son, don't worry about it. Mm-hmm. You're going to be all right. Like, here's some of the things you're going to do. Back yourself. Here's the way forward. And I just find that it's kind of really reassuring, right? Because if I go back to when I was a 10-year-old boy or a 30-year-old or a 20-year-old, I went, hey, this is where you're going to be now. That 10-year-old kid would never, ever, ever have thought, watching Miami Vice, you're going to be living on the northern beaches of Sydney. You're going to be living on one of the best beaches in the world and all that stuff, right? Like, you just would have went, what? No way, right? So I think it's such an empowering kind of exercise to be able to take who you are as a person, look back at where you've been, know that you're the one that's got yourself to where you are now, and that you can back yourself for the future, right? Because every time it's come to it, when the big moments have been there, like that Eminem song, it's like lose yourself. In them, when the big moments are there, you've done what you needed to do to get to where you are now. And I think that's one of the things that kind of we'll lose sight of, and founders lose sight of. You were talking about the commonalities of all your guests, and I've started doing something now with my podcast where I always get one major insight. I'm going to share that with the audience in the newsletter. But last week's podcast was, it was a guy in his second or third rodeo, and it was like, the Chinese proverb, like, everybody starts out by making that first step. No matter how it is, everybody started out the same way, and it was taking the chance, right?
Yeah.
His was, he met with an investor, he was a bit cheeky, got in front of him, and he went, all right, you got 15 minutes. It was a bit like kind of Wall Street, he's got the cigars for him. He's like, give me something. And he went, all right, I'll back you, but you got to quit your job in 2 weeks, and like, we'll go all in. And he had to go to his wife to say, look, that thing I was talking about. It's there. And I think that's kind of, we every single founder I've spoken to had that moment. Some of them have had it where it was like me, where it was like, look, I just knew if I didn't do it, I'd never forgive myself. Some people came into money. Some people just were, big event in their life. Some people moved. It's, I think, the thing that kind of aligns everybody, Julian, is everybody that I've met. There's a line in the movie Gladiator, what we do in life echoes in eternity.
Yeah, I watched it recently on the plane.
Yeah,
love that
it's
movie
just an amazing
so much,
movie. It's an amazing movie, but that
I'm a
kind
big
of
Marcus
line.
Aurelius fan too, so you read a lot and then you try and sort of.
Yeah, but look, that line I think really kind of resonates with me, because what I see these people doing is, they're really humble. They're not talking about changing the world. They just want to make a mark on the world, right? They just want to do something that they're remembered for. And I think that's really noble, right? Like to kind of put yourself out there knowing that
Create
you're
a
going to get
legacy.
shot down, right? You're
Yeah.
going to get criticized. You're going to fail. Like the odds are stacked against you. You still go and do it. Like who can't admire that, right?
Yeah, that's why I hate the tall poppy stuff. I think like I don't know, I've just never understood it. And the Max Verstappen thing, I mean, like the guy won 19 out of 20 races last year, and I mean we've never seen that before.
Yeah.
And we'll probably never see it again. Like who knows? And so you know, I just want to see. I actually enjoy the battle and the nuances of like the little tweaks they make to the car to get the extra decimal points of improvement.
Mate, I'm sure you do the same in your business, right? It's
Yeah,
the 1%ers, right?
And at a certain point, it's not even the 1%ers; it's the 0.1%ers, and you know, there's nothing really that you know. And I've had different people come in and sort of look over the business and you know try and give some guidance and advice. And like at the end of the day, there's people that can come in with a fresh perspective and pull levers to help for sure. But we're not talking about levers that are going to move the needle so much that it's a different business overnight. You know, it's already past that point. It's already a bit more mature than that point where it's like, oh, just pull this one lever here, one lever here. All of a sudden, the business is, you know, 10xing. It's just not that easy with the level we're at now. But to the just going back to being on the winning team, the one of the reasons why you don't want to be on the losing team is because most good leaders, I'm saying good ones, not great ones, good leaders, people that people widely respect as a quality leader, they're really good at leading during the good times.
Yeah.
And whilst the business is on the up. And there's a great book I read called The Hard Thing About Hard Things, and specifically in there references peacetime CEOs and wartime CEOs, and that's basically the good times and the bad times. And it's actually extremely rare for good leaders to have both, and really only the upper, the tier one people are good at both.
Yeah.
But the likelihood that you have that all the way through the management and executive team all the way down is almost zero.
Well, if you look, I mean, closer to home, right? So Alan Joyce left Qantas recently. Yeah, and like he was always heralded as either being good or bad based on the share price.
Yeah.
Right? But when the share price was doing well, it had nothing to do with what Alan Joyce was doing. It had to do with the price of oil. Right? When the price of oil went down, they didn't have to reduce their flight prices, right? So, and kind of at the same time, I think the Aussie dollar, kind of reduced down against the US dollar as well, right? Yeah. So like they got a double whammy from it, and it was like, oh, he's a genius, and it's like, okay, but he's not doing anything differently to when he was the worst CEO ever, right? And then he's back to being the worst CEO ever again, and it's like, well, he hasn't really done anything differently. He's not changed, and so what's changed is just the perception, and the perception is just because of the result.
Yeah.
And the result or the outcome, is always like, just based on share price or profit or whatever it is. And if that's what we use as the barometer for success, it's crazy, right? Because the reality is, right, you know that, the success that you're getting now isn't because of what you're doing now. It's what you did 12 months ago,
that's right.
9 months ago, 6 months ago.
The
right?
investment in...
Like my business had a really good strong end to the year, but in terms of the balance sheet, I'm only starting to see that kind of filter through now, right? So, if the kind of tax man, or if I go to go to get a loan, they go, oh, you didn't do well last quarter, I'd say, yeah, but in the last 9 months I've done X amount of hundreds of thousands of dollars, and I right, but we can't see that right now, so we gotta so there's kind of this thing where you get looked at a snapshot, and kind of depending on what that snapshot is, you deemed either a failure or a success. And I think one of the things that certainly I've kind of learned to recognize is, you kind of focus on the 1%ers. You just be disciplined. You just be consistent, right? And like the outcome is noise.
Yes.
Right? Like, and sometimes the outcome is way better than you ever expected.
Of course.
And sometimes it's shit. Right? Absolutely shit. And you're kind of embarrassed, but you look back and you go, hey, look, I did all the things that I was doing before. What can I do differently?
Yeah,
well,
December's a month like that for us,
Yeah, but the reality is, hey, look, this is what the market's doing. And, as much as you want to think that you've got some Jedi mind trick powers of making people, hire someone, when they're not hiring, right? Like, and that's just the reality. So I think it's kind of super important that as, particularly in small businesses, that you just have that discipline. And of course, I think one of the challenges for founders, Julian, is a lot of them, it's their first rodeo. So they don't know kind of right from wrong, right? They don't know what the kind of path is. They don't have like a formula or a process or set of systems around sales, which I think is probably one of the reasons why we have such a high failure rate. It's one of the reasons why your business is so successful. It's because you've been on the ground, right?
Mildly
no,
successful.
But you've been on the ground, right? You've done it. You've seen it. You've seen the process. You've seen what works, what doesn't.
And there
work.
wouldn't be a position in the business that I haven't done myself at some point.
Yeah.
So I'm hiring. I understand sort of who needs to be in which position, what type of personality, what type of, and most importantly, the work that I do put into bringing the right people in that fit within our culture and our values.
Yeah.
That sets us up for success.
And I'm glad you said work, because people, I think one of the biggest issues that we've got around this whole thing around talent shortages, people just are not prepared to do the work that's required to figure all of that stuff out, right?
Yeah.
And this is kind of an interesting stat, but 50% of the inquiries that I get about hiring, when I sit down and chat with the client, we talk around what's the big problem that you're trying to solve. Turns out that in 50% of the cases, they don't actually need to hire. They're all that they can be about hiring, right? Could be a different role, or they might have somebody internally, or it might be a offshoring opportunity. Or it might be that, that problem will be gone in 3 months, and then we've just spent like all this money hiring someone who's not going to be required. What about if we bring in a contractor or a consultancy or something?
Those people are lucky they came to you because you're so open and so honest. And I'll tell you a story for those listening. Some of the people that I've spoken to that have dealt with Dexter have spoken about how they feel comfortable because at certain points in time, you're recommending an option as a serious suggestion to them that involves you not getting paid.
Yeah.
And there's not a lot. I've dealt with a lot of recruiters.
Yeah.
And
Maybe, I know it, right? I know, and that's why I start my own business, right? So, we're looking for, to describe this mythical creature. And we got loads of them on a database.
Yeah, and the reality is you're so right. When you bring in someone really, really good, a lot of other good people follow. And a lot of our recruiting has been done that way. Like we've got some people from LinkedIn ads, but and that kind of thing. But most of it has been from the content we put out on LinkedIn, or our social media, or from bringing someone into the business through word of mouth, and then they've 3-4 other people from their team or who have worked with them have joined the business. And so there's a lot of work you have to do to get to that point. And there's a lot of things that you'll do that you just feel like they're immediately and in the short term a waste of time.
It's very similar to your sales engine, right? Like you think, right, you're trying to build a pipeline of customers, you're trying to build a pipeline of talent coming through, right? And if you kind of think about how you're growing the business, well, that pipeline, it's not about, right, we're just going to stick up a Google ad and then we're going to get all these customers. You've got a whole campaign around how do you keep people coming in, right? You've got a whole network, right? You go out, you count your partners, too. Right? Exactly, right? Your partners, you got to engage with them the whole time, right? Whereas when it comes to hiring, if businesses took the same approach to customer acquisition and they applied that to hiring, they'd have far greater success.
For sure.
But they don't. They put up a dog shit ad on a platform where you've only got like
job seekers.
It's job seekers looking for at it. Going, we're awesome. You should feel so lucky to come and work for us. And by the way, we're not going to tell you how much we're going to pay you. But apply and kind of go to all this hassle of filling in these application forms, and we'll not come back to you anyway. It's just customers. If you did that, right,
you would never do that to
like
a customer.
Exactly, right. What you're doing is you're trying to get rid of that whole process. We know that's a ball ache, right? And other lenders are making you do all this bullshit, We're not going to do that, right?
Yeah.
Right? But imagine then you go to people wanting to join your business. Fill in this application form. It's going to take you 3 hours. And we'll let you know. Oh, yeah, credit check says, you can't, right? Like, it's exactly the same process
It is, yeah.
that, you expect people to go through. So I think that whole approach that you've got, it's holistic to making it an aspirational place that people want to work, right?
Yeah.
Right. And if people
that's
want
part of it.
yeah,
'Cause that's how you get the best people.
It is.
The best people are not the ones sitting in the job seeker platforms. The best people are the ones that are currently doing a job that maybe feel undervalued.
Yeah, exactly.
Overworked.
You know what? They're the top 10%, right, in a current place, because what happens is, this is one of the biggest travesties, I think, in management and leadership. Most leaders focus on the bottom 20% and think they can somehow, they're amazing, right? Like, and they can make these people better. When what they need to do is focus on the top 10% and make everybody else want to aspire to be like them.
Yeah.
Because I don't know about you, right? But I've been really fortunate to work with some of the best people in the industry. And I'd go and I'd start a new job and I'd be like, fuck me, I need to step up like 3 gears here.
Yeah.
Like, you best get your fucking A game on.
Yeah.
And a bit more, right? And I'd just hear things and I'd be like, oh, wow, we said that with just like this little thing, or just use that phrase there, right? See people in a meeting, they'd be like, fuck, what? And it'd blow my mind, right? I'd be like, all right. And I would literally like go home and practice stuff, right? And like, because I just, there was no way that I could work in an environment like that and not be at least kind of competing and trying to, kind of like be in amongst it.
It's the same sort of analogy that the tide rises all boats. If you're in a competitive environment, that's healthy, right? Like, competition is healthy, makes everyone better.
Yeah.
And as long as it's not to the point where it's toxic and people are sabotaging each other and all that kind of stuff, if it can be tempered, it's such a powerful tool to make everyone better. And also, I like to make sure that people are always entering in that sort of beginner mindset. I think that is where the best learning and the best development is done, when you start something new. So, when you reach a certain level of proficiency in your job, you can become complacent, or maybe not complacent in the traditional sense, but maybe like you stop trying to look for the 1% improvement.
Yeah. So here's something interesting. And sorry to interrupt, but I think it's a really important point. So obviously, I'm working with the top people, and there are certain things that everybody has as qualities that they all share, right? And one of them in the top people is they're most uncomfortable when they start getting comfortable.
Yes. Yeah.
To your point.
Yeah.
Right?
Like so every time I feel like I've reached a point, I've said this before, and I use the martial arts analogy. I say you should always be a white belt at something. Yeah. Because in my view, the hardest belt to get, most people say black belt to that answer. It's actually the white belt. And the reason for that is, if you just look at it at a pure maths perspective, white belts, like people who actually put their pride and ego and everything else aside to say, I am a beginner. I'm going to go into this martial arts gym and I'm going to learn. It doesn't matter whether it's karate or jiu-jitsu or whatever it is. I'm going to put all of that stuff aside, because especially men have this strange thing, like, where they assume they all know how to fight. Men just think they naturally know how to fight. And it doesn't, if you said to, it's similar with other things, like if you said to any bloke, do you think you could drive a Formula One car?
Oh yeah.
I can drive. The Camry last time I did 110 in a 80 zone. I could definitely drive a Formula One car.
You'll never hear a bloke say, "I didn't know that."
but maybe if you said to a bloke, "You think you could fly a plane?" Like, he's probably going to say no. Oh no, I don't think I'd be able to fly a plane because it's not.
Mate, but the blokes I know would say, "Yeah, I can fly one. I'm not sure if I can land it, but."
So it's weird. There's certain things that blokes especially have this strange thing about how good they are, and then they go and put their pride and ego aside. They put on the white belt. They start at a gym, and then the 60-kilo girl beats the shit out of them, and then once they have that moment, they're like, actually, I don't know how to fight for shit, or I don't know how to drive a Formula One car. I can barely drive this go-kart, with any level of speed or proficiency. So once you have that moment, and then the pursuit of learning and acquiring the skill, and especially in that beginning part, you can get so much momentum because the progress is just so rapid.
Yeah.
And momentum is a real thing. Like momentum has psychological impacts and improvements. Like there's a book called The Winning Effect. There's Andrew Huberman's spoken about it as well. You get, like, for example, with men, you get a boost in testosterone. You get physical advantages by getting small wins, and same thing with dopamine and all these things that have you operating with a great deal of confidence that help you win even more. And it's the same for losing. It's actually the inverse, though.
Yeah.
So when you start losing, you need something to get you out of that slide, that spiral, and starting something new where you're a beginner and you can get rapid progress can get you out of that.
Yeah.
So I always push people to learn something new, acquire a new skill, go and be a beginner at something. That is where a lot of the improvements come from. And the lessons that you can take from those things can be, not always, but almost always, directly applied into the job that you're doing as your primary source of income.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's interesting you say that the top people are doing that. They're most comfortable they're most uncomfortable when they feel just even that slight bit of complacency creeping in.
Yeah.
And, I think if you can find a way to really, anytime you feel that creeping in, anytime you feel like you were meant to do a task, but because no one's going to almost hold you accountable for it being a bit late or anything like that, you need to squash that, and you need to go and find something.
And it's hard, right? Because I think one of the other things is, particularly when you're running a small business, you got so many different things to do, and you have to do them all competently, right? You can't screw them up, otherwise it has a big impact on the business. And I think one of the things that I've recognized is that sometimes you just have to kind of leave it and come back to it when you're in a better space or when you're in a flow. And then kind of as you do that, you start to figure out and you kind of read the signals. And so for me, I tend to feel I'm at my most creative first thing in the morning, late thing at night. So that might be when I might write a post or might edit a podcast or do something like that. And then I'm kind of really through the day is when I want to be talking to people, doing all of that stuff, having meetings. And then kind of again, weekends is like usually when I want to do the boring stuff, because I find that's kind of quite meditative. I don't have the worry of on my mind, I've got to do this, got to do that, this isn't productive, I'm not making the most of it. And I think that kind of once you get those kind of patterns of how you want to perform, but where you kind of get your energy from and what takes energy away and how do you get that flow, right? And for me, it's kind of like Monday to Friday. I'm fortunate. I've got clients in Europe, I've got clients in the US, I've got clients in Asia, but it does mean that I could be on a call at 10 o'clock at night and on a call again at 5 a.m., right? So, it's kind of how do you kind of keep that going. Like this morning, right, I was driving down, it was a 90-minute drive. I woke up at 3 a.m., right? I was like, couldn't get back to sleep. I was so excited about doing this podcast with you, right? But
thank you.
It's kind of those things, right, where you just, you kind of just have to go with the flow, right? And you just have to go, okay, this is going to kind of hit me later on today when I'd planned to do some other stuff. how do I move things around? And so it's kind of, you've got this constant kind of, calendar diary that's all the priorities are just shifting the whole time.
Yep.
And it's, it's like a puzzle that you're not trying to put together because it's never complete, right? But you're just trying to kind of move things around. And I think that's kind of one of the things that, again, modern day leaders, so many people, I think, struggle and get frustrated with things changing.
Yeah.
And things are changing so fast now, Julian.
Oh, it's crazy.
I've got a little kind of, rule that if I call somebody about an opportunity and one of the first things they ask for is a job description, I know they're probably not the right person. Because if they need a job description just to have a discussion, and not understand what the actual opportunity is and what are the outcomes that you're looking for, but just what will I be doing every day? It's kind of, I don't know what you're going to be doing every day, right? It's gonna change.
I reckon those are the people we scratch in our business too. Like, there's some roles that job description helps them understand like what the role entails, but for anyone who's going to be in any sort of leadership position, it's like everything's your job in the business. Like, there's going to be days where you have to do like what I do. There's going to be days where I'm going to be out of action, and you're going to be stepping into the roles, responsibilities, meetings that I have to take. And if you want a job description, go and work at a bank or a corporate where it's like you're pigeonholed. And if you want to work in a startup or a scale up or anything that has any level of like sort of like a dynamic aspect, then you shouldn't be asking for that. You should be trying to acquire, especially if you're younger in your career, try to acquire as many skills as you possibly can.
Even more so when you're older in your career.
It's true. Yeah.
I think that's one of the challenges, right?
Let me
like,
take that back.
As you get older, you said it before, right?
Yeah.
In your 50s, 60s, you're facing irrelevance, right?
Yeah.
And
you've
you've had a whole career where you've had it, look, if you've done well, you've kind of had it probably reasonably easy. It's going to be a lot more difficult this next 10, 20 years. And I think people have to get set that, look, like Madonna, you're going to have to be reinventing yourself. Yeah. And I think, certainly I was fortunate, I had kids a bit old. I was in my mid-30s when I first became a dad. And I'm really grateful for that experience because it's kept me young at a point when I could be getting old and stuck in my ways. And I'm not, I've got a daughter who's going to be a teenager pretty soon. And, it's like my eyes get opened to her world and her friends' world and what's going on there and how they interact with technology and what their expectations are. And I think it also just, what I see from them is the way that they learn, right? Yeah. And it kind of, makes me hungry to want to learn. And you talked about learning new things. And my boy, he does indoor climbing. And recently I started going with him. I used to just take him and he'd do a class, but now he and I go and he started showing me how to climb. And it's really cool. It's a very good way of not only keeping fit, but like mentally zoning out.
Now,
it's like, I assume, yes, you get similar from jiu-jitsu, right?
Yeah.
It's like problem solving. It's not like it's an exercise, but you're figuring out like how to,
where do I put this?
How do I do that? Right. Kind of, and then you get that buzz of you being unable to do it. And then you figure out the way to do it, right? And it's not like, oh, well, that's it, now it's done. It's like, oh, great, I can do it again, let's do it again, right? Yeah. You build confidence that way. So I think all of these things, right, when you kind of put them together, you look at what does it boil down to? And I think it's, growth mindset.
Yeah.
Being humble, right? And just surrounding yourself with the best people. If you do those things, I think you're going to be all right. But
what are some of the other things you've noticed more on the, so we've spoken a little bit about on what the people from the talent side. Yeah. But what about like, what have you seen in leaders, that, the traits in leaders that maybe haven't worked out so well, and probably at some point you've had to say, look, we're not going to continue this engagement.
Yeah, it's, so one of the kind of things I'm really reluctant to do is to work with early stage businesses that, they haven't got kind of sophisticated enough or big enough investors to have a strong enough influence over them. And look, it's not a slight on the founders. It's just the level that are higher at, you're bringing in people to take things away from them, and they find it really difficult to let go.
Yeah. Okay.
And if you're paying somebody a lot of money, right, and you're trying to tell them how you think they should be doing stuff, and they've come in under the premise that they're actually going to show you how to scale your business, it doesn't really work out. And so I think, kind of key trait to look for in founders is really, that humility of what I don't know.
Yeah.
And bringing in people that actually do, and then trusting them to do it. And I think that thing, trust, is the hardest thing, because the way I would liken it, right, it's like, I just kind of dread that if my wife and I ever separated, and go and see the kids at the weekend and they're not there because the new dad's doing all the stuff that I want to be doing with them, and kind of taking that mantle on board, I'd find it really difficult to do that, right? But, if I'm a dad who's not really doing a very good job of that, and there's somebody better to do it, then maybe I need to kind of accept that, right? And deal with it. And so I can understand kind of the emotion that's attached to it, but you have to really look longer term and go, okay, what is it really that I want? What do I want this business to be? Am I really equipped to do that, or do I really need to hand it over and kind of let go of some of the things, right? And unfortunately, I've also seen people who have done that, and they've picked the wrong person as well, and that then becomes compounded that, well, I'm not going to do that again. And I kind of think it's such a big decision that I can understand why people are reluctant to do it, but also then it requires so much due diligence, and unfortunately, people want to hire really quickly. And I think with these types of roles or board appointments, you really need to have kind of a relationship beforehand. Know whether that's getting to know each other over 6 months, 12 months, or whether you've worked together previously.
It's not a fast process.
Yeah, it's not a fast process, and if it is, I'm always concerned about that.
Yeah, the board ones are very interesting because like, especially non-executive style, it's so important to have a balance of independence, but also, they need to know the business too, right?
Yeah,
and they need to know you and
back, right?
the dynamic of the partners. And
I mean, it's funny, right? I see so many people in my network who aspire to this portfolio career where they've got all these directorships, and you do realize you're not going to get paid for any of these things. There's a very, very small percentage of people doing these roles that get paid anything, near to being able to make a living from it, right? If you're going to be in fintech, you got to accept that, you're going to be doing this. You might get some sweat equity in return.
Yeah.
Right. But you got to be doing it because you deeply care about the founder, right? You believe in what they're doing, like what they're building, right? You want to be part of it. And let's face it, right? You're only giving up 4 hours a month.
Yeah, I know, it's not a lot.
Yeah, it's not a lot, right? It's not a lot. And so, I think that kind of getting that is hard, right? Because people have a perception when they go into this. I think Billy Connolly, the comedian, said that the desire to be a politician should bar you for life from ever being one. Meaning that, it's kind of something that chooses you, not you choose it.
Exactly, yeah.
And I think kind of board directors is a bit like that. The best ones have always been reluctant. The best ones have always been people that I've just introduced and they've had a coffee and they really like the founder. I'm like, hey, I'd like to help. And they started off just little bits and it snowballed and got bigger.
Yeah.
And, then turned into a directorship or a chair role. And that could be 2-3 years down the track, right? So I think that those types of, when it comes to the senior and the leadership stuff, founders really need to be like day in, day out, thinking about who's going to be, what the succession planning is, how that looks like, who are the people in their network, how do they connect, how do they, when they meet people, keep that relationship going so that when the time is right, you both are, hey, it's time.
Yeah, and you can walk away from the business.
Yeah.
That's really ultimately
Yeah.
what you should be trying to do as a founder, is building it to the point where it has no or very little reliance on you.
Yeah.
Otherwise, it doesn't really have a lot of enterprise value.
Yeah.
You need to build the team, and the systems, the procedures, all the way up, so that you can basically have a handbook that says this is how we operate, and this is the playbook. Here's the playbook, and I'm going to give you the playbook, and it's now your playbook. And if you run this playbook, obviously it might need to be adapted over time to move with the market, but this playbook is how we run the business in the current day. And they might have ideas on changing things, but ultimately that playbook should translate to the current success, or better if it's executed slightly better.
Yeah. And I think this is where a big problem lies, is just the knowledge gaps that we've currently got in the Australian market, because most of the people who've worked in large organizations have only worked in large organizations, and to get from where you are now to get to there's hundreds of steps in between.
Yeah, and sometimes you see that people come from those big businesses, and they're like, how we grow is we just hire more people.
Yeah.
And then the founder's like, oh my God, how are we going to pay for all these? The amount of times I've seen people like bring someone who's growth into the business, and it literally is what kills the business. Because the people that have unlimited money, or not unlimited, they have a large runway, because they've got big VC money or whatever it might be. It's if you just throw people at it, you can grow like that for sure. But for a founder who maybe doesn't have the deep pockets, or maybe it's bootstrapped or whatever, you have to be so surgical with your picks.
Even if you've got deep pockets, I think the way that you have to look at every single leadership hire is, does this person help us earn the right to another 6 months?
Yeah, that's great.
Because the reality is, right, in those hundreds of steps in between, each one of them is a 6 month, 12-month cycle that the business completely changes, right? It keeps changing, keeps changing, keeps changing, keeps changing. And so the people that you acquire are going to keep changing. And so, if you're looking at somebody as a 6, 12, 18-month hire, that's actually really healthy for this type of business. Whereas to look at somebody and go, we need to be here for 5 years to deliver, no chance, right? So,
and the way that when I talk about it or think about it, I almost think of that hire. Like, it doesn't matter what it is. I'm just going to use a round number here, but let's say it's $20K, a month to pay this person. The question that you also need to ask is, maybe not immediately, but is this person going to feel if they start on the month on minus $20,000 as an example? What's the likelihood that they're going to fill it up?
Yeah.
And maybe even overflow the cup to get past break. And those people you can bring on in quick succession if they're going to add value, and you're pretty sure about that. But sometimes it's not directly measurable, so that's where it gets a bit harder. And then you need to understand, okay, what are the things that we can measure that means they provide the $20,000 to fill the cup back up in other ways?
Yeah.
Whether it's taking giving you back time as a CEO founder, or whether it's improving the team culture so you're not losing staff. Like, it doesn't matter, which costs more than $20,000, right? What sort of partnerships are they really savvy? Can they negotiate commercial terms with your suppliers? What relationships do they have? So, but that's like an easy way for you to go, okay, and sometimes it will take them 3 months.
Yeah.
And look, I think 6 months and 12 months.
And the other part of it as well, which is the bit that you absolutely can't measure, is the dynamic, right?
Yeah.
What energy does that person bring?
Yeah.
What energy does it bring out of you?
Yes.
Right? Like, what is that kind of, 1 + 1 doesn't equal 2, right? What does it equal? And so, kind of hiring the right person can be the difference between you being a unicorn, and failing, right? And it's, it's just so hard to measure, right? I can't measure it. I don't know what the answer is. But when you see it, you know it.
You know it.
You know
it's
it,
obvious,
right? You know it. But look, the kind of reality is that it's not something that I think you can bottle up. You can look at things and go, okay, let's de-risk it. And I think my job is to de-risk the hire as much as possible. Look, we've done our DD. We've seen them get similar results in a similar environment. with similar resources. So, kind of the chances are they'll be able to do this again,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And we've vouched them and spoken to people on our network who I've known and trust, who are really right, who said great things about them, right? That's kind of, as much as you can de-risk it, right? And kind of push back and make sure everybody's clear, everybody knows what they're getting into, everybody's aligned on the plan, everybody knows that day one, here's what we're going to do, here are the big problems that I'm going to solve, here's the big goal, but in the next 30 days, this is what we want to do. You get all those things right, you can de-risk it. But that doesn't guarantee that it's going to be magic.
No, that's right.
Just guarantee, Kate gives a high chance it's not going to be a shit show. And so I think that's kind of, that there's so many things that kind of factor into that are just really hard to pick up. And it's kind of, I think one of the reasons why is that people aren't static, right? We have things that go on in our life that impact, events that happen that impact that kind of energy flow, right? And it's like, you'll have worked in places, I've worked in places where you've got the magic. You try to recreate it, and you can't, right?
Yeah.
You just can't get it back, right? And you can't put your finger on what it was, right? And it's because everybody had their own thing that they were bringing, and for whatever reason, just, the magic happened.
Timing and perfect storm and, all the stuff. It is real. And sometimes businesses go through cycles of that because it's so much easier to create that when everyone's winning. It's whether the true resilient businesses, the ones that will have sustained success, are the ones who can maintain that magic even through the tougher periods. And that goes back to that sort of only a very small amount of leaders can lead through the darker times, the tougher times, and make people still feel comfortable, where it's not a ruthless, cutthroat, every man or woman for themselves. Because often companies with really good cultures, when they're on the way up, descend into this, almost like becomes barbaric almost, and you see it all the time. You're like, I thought that place had a really good culture. And like, yeah, it did. And then, a few bad months in a row, this person had a fight with that person. This person was pointing fingers. And
this is an important thing when you're hiring, right? Like, it's really the stress test how people act and respond in the tough times, not in the good times.
Yes.
Because as you point out, right, it's easy to win, right? It's much easier to win from a winning position, far harder to win from a losing position, right?
Yeah.
And so, if you're in a position where you're losing right now, pointless hiring somebody from Canva who's used to going on holiday to Thailand and having, personal chefs and all that stuff, right? Because they're not going to get it. And, I don't know what help they're going to be.
You want the sleeves rolled up.
Yeah,
you
exactly,
want that higher.
Right? You want somebody who's kind of been through some busted businesses before. Who's like, look, kind of, these are the things that we don't do. Here are the things we need to focus on right now that are going to get us results tomorrow that aren't going to cost us much money, right? Like, that's the difference between somebody who's going to help you be successful and somebody who's going to drive you into the ground, right? They're going to go, oh, we need to rebrand. The amount of rebrands that I've seen in the last 18 months. And I remember one of my old mentors and bosses said to me during the GFC, and during the downturn, you're going to find there's two types of CEO. Someone who changes the business and somebody who changes the logo.
Yeah.
Do not ever let one of our clients hire the one who's going to change the logo.
Yeah. That's hilarious. Well, look, we have a little tradition on this podcast, and we basically end with you giving us your 60-second pitch on why choose, tier one people. So, on the count of three, just think about why, if I'm looking for an executive, looking for a C-suite, looking for to fill a board position, looking to fill a leadership position that's very important for my business. Why should I? I know why, but for everyone listening, to tell them why. So
we've worked with really renowned businesses like Revolut and helped them, launch in Oz. I think the biggest compliment I could give myself is that the people that we've hired for Revolut are still there 4 years later, which I think must be the only recruiter in the world with that type of record. But look, kind of all of the plaudits aside, and the fact that, we hire not only highly talented people for these businesses, but that they're there 2, 3, 4 years later, is that I think I'm actually the only recruiter who's actually suggested to a client they should not hire a candidate through myself who they wanted to offer a role for. And that was because of behaviors that I seen that really weren't in alignment with their values. And when I shared that with the client, they agreed. So I think oftentimes my job isn't just about helping clients hire the best person, but it's to help them avoid hiring the wrong person as well. And I just, unfortunately, in my industry, I don't know of too many recruitment consultants who are prepared to, go to that extent, even if it means walking away from a big deal or a sizable invoice.
Yeah, that's good, and that's, I can vouch for that absolutely, just by some of the conversations I've had with your candidates and clients. I think you're widely respected. Your podcast is the best. I mean, the stories that you get told, you can hear the Lendy origin story and all the greatest founders stories and startup stories of our industry. And it doesn't matter if you're fintech or not. I mean, startups are startups, and the journeys, there's so many lessons along the way. So if you haven't already subscribed, you're crazy. Go and subscribe, and make sure you listen to Dexter on the FinTech Chatter, and follow him on LinkedIn and all the company pages and stuff. Thank you so much, Dexter. What an honor. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Julian. It's been really
Appreciate
good to chat and kind of just chinwag with you.
Yeah. Absolute pleasure. Thank you.
Thanks, man.